Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Friday, February 6, 2026 episode of the Marco Geray Show. Thank you for tuning in to hear today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. It's Friday, so you know what that means. It's time for our weekly economic report. I'm going to cover it all with you. Let's see how our top marginal stocks are doing today after the week that we had with our stock market. We've got the S&P 500 now up 1.36% from yesterday's close. We saw some AI trends in big tech, and of course the semiconductor strength giving it a little bit of a rebound, trading at $6,890.59 as of today. The NASDAQ trading at $22,909.53 a share, up 1.64% from yesterday's close. Rebounded sharply again due to the AI, the cloud, the semiconductor stock gains that we saw today. And finally, we saw the Dow Jones, which outperformed both the S&P and NASDAQ alike, up 1.9%, trading at $49,839.63 a share. And a lot of that has to do with the investors rotating into value and cyclical stocks and seeing that the earnings are remaining high. So again, a little bit of a volatility in the week, but we're seeing some rebounds taking place today. Yesterday was pretty drastic as far as the drop throughout the stock market. Let's look at our tech. Let's look at our crypto stocks right now. Bitcoin took quite a big hit from last week's close, which was $83,000 in that mark. Trading today at $70,167.94 a share, up 2.52% from yesterday's close. Nvidia took a very big hit from last week, down 11% from last week's close. However, made a little bit of a rebound today, at a 6.55% increase, trading at $183.13 a share. Like I said before, the AI semiconductor demand is driving some strong buying in that market today. And again, we'll see that throughout a lot of these different stocks, as you'll see. Meta, a little bit of a pullback after some recent highs. It's down 2.20%, trading at $655.44 a share. And people are starting to sell. That's why you're seeing some pullbacks there. We know that last week we saw some of the ad confliction going on with people pulling out of the ad market. So that was bringing that stock down just a little bit. Apple, which is up from last week, seeing some modest gains, trading at $279.23 a share, up 1.2% from yesterday. Amazon taking quite a big hit, losing 7.83% from yesterday's close, trading at $205.25 a share. Pretty big, sharp drop. And the reason this is happening, let me explain this to you. Amazon recently announced a 60% increase in AI spending within the company. That's $200 billion. Now, investors see this and they believe that Amazon is being too aggressive in its AI input. And they're not sure if the returns will be as fast. So what you're seeing is a lot of people selling that Amazon stock, and as a result, we're seeing the overall price beginning to drop. We move into Alphabet/Google right now, trading at $321.42 a share, down 2.97% from yesterday's close. And again, we're seeing weakness in the search and the cloud sentiments as well. As I told you before with Meta, we saw the conflicts with the advertising on these search engines as well, bringing it down just a little bit. Then we move into Microsoft, trading at $396.22 a share, growing 0.65% from yesterday's close. Still moving positively, though, upwards. Dell Technologies trading at $120.39 a share, up 4.33% from yesterday's close. And we're seeing some high hardware demand improving as well with this stock. And by the way, this is one of the only two stocks, this along with Apple, up from where they were a week ago. Everything else is down despite some modest gains in today's market. Broadcom trading at $330.70 a share, up 6.5% from yesterday's close. Quite a big gain. But it's still down from last week, and AI networking plus the chip software are increasing the demand for this. So what we're seeing across the board with all these techs and their stocks, it's declining broadly this week because of the sharp pullbacks by investors, largely in the semiconductor field, and of course the related software. We're also seeing AI-related software, the uncertainty with that, and of course the heavy profit taking caused by the tech sector. And now, as a result, it is down across the board 6% this week from last week. That is 6% of these stocks that are now gone. Now, again, it's volatile, and a lot of it has to do with, again, the talks of the war with Iran. Despite the talks so-called improving, we'll talk about that after we run through our economic report, what's happening in that arena. But all this has to do with the way our stocks are producing this week, folks. Uncertainty ahead leads to people selling their stocks, taking their money, taking their profits. That's why we're seeing this. And that's why we're seeing gold right now down 1.11% today from yesterday. It's trading upwards of $4,908.70 a share as of noon today. Silver trading at $81.87 a share, down 7.04% from yesterday's close. Platinum trading at $2,160 a share, down some 3.53% from yesterday's close. And palladium trading at $1,702 an ounce, down 2.35% from yesterday's close. So what analysts are telling us is over the last few weeks, we saw this surge here, and they believe that it may have marked a short-term top. Now, I don't believe that's true. Other people I've spoken with and read say that that's probably not the case here. But what we are seeing is a cooling economy, and as a result of that, it makes the precious metals a little less of a safe haven, or so they believe. So that's why you're seeing people selling gold, because it didn't maintain that $5,000 mark. Last week at the close was somewhere around $5,200 an ounce. So it's a little bit down this week. But again, overall, all these are still very much up from where they were a year ago. And I do believe they will all continue to go up. And likewise, we're looking at oil. Look at Brent crude right now, trading at $66.63 per barrel. That's down 1.36% from yesterday's close. And WTI crude trading at $62.28 a barrel. Again, as of noon on the East Coast, that's down 1.6% from yesterday's close. What we're seeing here, we're seeing demand concerns. What are we seeing demand concerns for? Well, because they're worried about the supply. Why are they worried about the supply? Because of the conflict we're talking about in the Middle East. Everything we're seeing in this market has a direct result some way or another with what's happening in the Middle East. We're also seeing a little bit of a stronger dollar. That's why you're seeing gold fluctuate a little bit as well, and some of these other precious metals. Oil is no different. And we're also seeing geopolitical tensions, as I mentioned to you. And of course, the fear of recession is hitting investors right now. The reality that we are going to go to war with Iran. That'll be a greater regional war, that this will continue on for a long time, that it will cut off 25% of the global oil trade. It's a big concern. And as I said to you before, should that happen, we are going to see economies collapse. And I don't think anybody wants that, but that's the way people feel about this. So people want to get out while they're ahead before this should take place. And I told you before it was going to happen sooner rather than later. It could happen this weekend, could happen next weekend. Trump tends to do things on the weekend so the markets don't respond right away and tank off. So, it could happen. It's a reality that this could happen. And only time will tell, but people respond to the rhetoric. That's what we're seeing right now. Let's talk inflation really quick. Now, we do know that is up 2.7% from, January 1st, 2025. Again, it was remaining fairly low. We always shoot for the 2 to 3% range. That's the desired inflation rate. But we have to understand, too, that prices were up 25 to 30% for all 4 years of the Biden administration, so that didn't help out at all. Unemployment as of December 2025 was 4.4%, up 0.4 percentage points since January of 2025, before Trump took office. And then we look at the labor force participation rate. I tend to look at this too because unemployment is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not necessarily gauging really how strong the economy is or what's happening in the economy. Unemployment figures tend to look at people that can work, that are out of work, that are looking for a job. They don't equate the people that can work that have simply dropped out of the job market overall. So let's understand that. Right now we're sitting at 62.4%, which has decreased from the previous month of November of 2025. That figure comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from December 2025. So we're down about 0.1%. And just for reference, mid-60s tends to be strong. That's obviously what's desired. But we saw 67% as of the late 1990s and early 2000s. So that's something that is still very much reachable. And just so we're clear on all this, after everything I've just told you about the stock market, the unemployment numbers, the labor force participation rate, inflation, our CPI at roughly 0.3% increase, 59% of Americans that have been polled suggest that the economy is not where they would like it to be. That means they disapprove of the Trump economy. And as we move into the midterms, I think what we're going to see is unless Trump can turn this around very, very soon, we will see that Republicans will struggle as time moves forward. So that's something we need to keep an eye on as time moves on. Will things improve? Will they not improve? But where are we? We're in a position where people do not like what's happening in this economy. It is not affordable for many different people. And that's very upsetting, especially to the younger people. That's one thing we've got to understand. An article in CNBC says that layoffs in January were the highest to start a year since 2009. This is coming from Challenger. And what he's saying, and again, I have to laugh at this because we haven't seen an economy like this since the Great Recession of 2009. We're seeing exactly almost a mirror of what was taking place then. So Challenger, Gray, and Christmas reported this on Thursday. It says U.S. employers announced 108,435 layoffs for the month. That is astounding, especially when it's up 118% from the same time period last year and up 205% from those same figures in December of 2025. That is a lot of people being laid off in quarter one. Now, that tends to happen more so in quarter one than it would in quarter four for various different reasons. But the total marked the highest for any January since 2029. And that is, of course, in the final months of the steepest downturn since the Great Depression. Again, just so we're clear on this. And at the same time, we saw companies announce only 5,306 new job hirings in the month of January. Again, the lowest since 2009. This is when they started tracking such data. So the reason I bring this up to you is because, again, this is reflected upon the American people. This is what they see. This is what they're experiencing right now. We're not seeing immense growth. We're seeing actually the opposite of that. So we've got to keep this all in mind. Again, when we look at the economy overall, are we hiring more people? Are we bringing in more jobs? And the answer to that, of course, is no, we're not. And by the way, just so we're clear on this, in 2025, we saw 1.1 million jobs lost. And by August, 806,000. Yes, by August itself. Unemployment reached 4.6% when it was just 4% when President Trump took office. So again, that's another thing indicative of what's happening. And instead of getting investments in manufacturing, we see the exact opposite. We're not seeing those good paying jobs in America. We're seeing tariffs again, which are taxes on the imports that come into this country. And they're not reducing our consumer price index at all. And of course, as I said to you earlier, it's up 0.3% as of December 2025. So all these things are factors in how people feel about this, especially young people, people that are going out and voting in droves. They're not happy with the way the economy is working. Now, the initial jobless claims for the week that ended in January of 31st totaled a seasonally adjusted 231,000, the highest since December, through the spike. Likely had something to do with a brutal winter storm that hit large parts of the country, and of course the long-term trend still was at its lowest since October of 2024. Again, we're seeing some of these high-profile layoffs across the board. We're seeing it in Amazon. We're seeing it in UPS. We're seeing it, again, in many of these different tech companies. And recently, they have announced a sizable job cuts as well. So, indeed, transportation had the highest level from a sector standpoint in January, due largely to plans for our UPS to cut more than 30,000 workers. We saw technology was second on the back of Amazon's announcement to shed some 16,000 jobs, mostly at the corporate level. Planned hirings dropped 13% from January 2025 and was off 49% from January. So we've got some, things are not improving like we want it to improve. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that job openings fell sharply in December to 6.54 million, a slide of 386,000 on a monthly basis and down more than 900,000 from the October level. Openings are now at the lowest since September of 2020. That was at the heart of the COVID lockdowns when the entire government was shut down and everyone was told to hunker down, as Anthony Fauci told us. So nothing positive is coming out of this report here from Challenger Grain Christmas. And I have to laugh at this because how do we think Republicans are going to win this if this is happening right now? It's not going to happen. You're not going to see any win because people are looking at what's happening and they're upset by this. And Edward Dowd himself said it's going to get a lot worse. Now, according to Edward Dowd, again, he used to work for BlackRock as a hedge fund manager. He's very versed on a lot of this. And he says that this is the worst things have been in his entire career. And he said it's going to get a lot worse as time goes on. Now, one of the things that he estimated, he said that some of the things that he estimated in 2025 didn't start happening, but he's starting to see that happen right now. What are these three risks that he's talking about for the U.S. economy in 2026? Well, the first thing he's talking about is the U.S. housing crisis. And what he's saying in this is simply that what Edward Dowd believes is that the immigrants that came into the country, again, during the Biden regime, right, they came in and filled this big gap. So in other words, the houses that were on the market, they were bought up. He said that's now stopped. What we're seeing now are deportations. They're going to continue over the next couple of years, and that's going to put pressure on homes. And affordability in itself is a disaster because we see the price of homes beginning to increase as well. Incomes do not allow people to buy homes at the prices that they're currently set at. And President Trump, by the way, has said that the existing housing, people that own their own homes, we're going to keep them wealthy. We're going to keep them, we're going to keep those prices up, is what he said. So again, how do you expect people to buy homes? How do you expect people to vote for you if they can't buy homes? Something they all desire to do. Again, I'm not saying everyone has a right to buy a home. Of course, you have a right to buy a home, but not anyone is granted a home. You've got to earn it, of course. But what people are seeing is that affordability, that dream, that aspiration is moving away. And as time goes on, obviously, it's a much, much bigger problem. What Edward Dowd suggests, though, is that the home prices need to drop about 25 to 30% over the next 2 years. That would set up a recovery for this. And if that can happen, then maybe we'll see a turnaround in that aspect. The second risk to the U.S. economy is a stock market bubble that he talks about. And he's talking about the AI bubble, is really what he's talking about here. I've talked about this on this show before. You've heard me say this. And he says we're starting to see the cracks there. He said it's almost valued as bad as the dot-com bubble. He said it might pop sometime this year. I've talked to you about this before. For example, Gerald Celent's talked about this before. But what is he saying about this? You've got many different factors working on about this. You have money pouring in and invested into companies and startups than real profits can justify. Many of these AI startups have no business model. Companies and their stocks are valued based on hype rather than production. And we could see that this cloud and, of course, this chip spending is growing faster than the revenue. Now, some of these companies are also pursuing AI, even if it's not even lucrative for their business model or the production in their company. Look at what Amazon's doing, and look what's happening as a result of this. So the bubble is growing. At some point, it's going to bust, of course. But investors believe that growth will be existential and last forever. That's not going to be the case with this. Certainly not at all. Along with other expectations that become unrealistic, of course. All these factors produce a bubble, and that doesn't materialize. It's obviously going to burst. And it doesn't help that the government has always been very bullish on this as well. Now, the third thing he talks about is China. What's happening in China right now? That's not being discussed. You're not seeing this anywhere. He says it's been a global contingent. What he's saying is it will hurt Japan and South Korea. And this will spill over into the United States. It'll become a liquidity crisis. And he said it's going to become, well, he wants to become bullish on the U.S. dollar as a result of this, which I thought was a little bit funny because we've seen the dollar recently really start to go down. The dollar is starting to obviously lose its purchasing value. Not a shock. We're seeing the price of gold go up. We're talking about the cutting of interest rates. That's why Trump is bringing in this new Fed chair, because this guy's going to bring down the price. Once the price of interest rates go down, he wants to bring it down to 1%. And as a result of that, the dollar drops its value, and you're going to see the price of gold continue to increase. We've seen it grow exponentially over the last year. So as a result of this, as a result of all this happening, Dowd is still bullish on the dollar. So what does he have to say about China, though? What is going on with China? And what are we seeing happen in China? He talks about a liquidity crisis, okay? And what he's saying here is that he's seeing some slow deterioration over the years. Again, we're seeing falling demographics inside China. We're seeing collapse of the real estate developments. We're seeing property crashes taking out some 2/5 of the market value since 2021. And that's fallen 6% just from last year. Okay, so we need to understand that. We're seeing weak consumer spending inside China. We're seeing a shrinking exports taking place. Despite some record high export trade surpluses like with the United States, I think they exceeded some $1 trillion. So Dowd is suggesting that liquidity is beginning to dry up inside China. We're seeing defaults expanding. And again, as I said before, the consumer confidence is collapsing inside the economy. China is also being the second largest economy in the world, will have its effects hit on other countries, like Japan, for example. Huge ties, major investments inside China. South Korea, huge dependent on Chinese electronics, their automobiles and other sectors. We're seeing Germany, the world's third largest economy. China is its largest export market. Again, if China's economy begins to collapse, it seems like it is, as a result, you're going to see a lot of these other countries struggle. And by the way, the United States would as well. We think about 31% of our imports come directly from China. If that gets cut off, what do we have now? And by the way, the Wall Street Journal said this as well. It said luxury comeback in China isn't likely because luxury spending last year dropped to 23%, much higher than the previous year. Yep, there it is. That's why you're seeing these things. So they were spending much more on luxury spending than they were this past year. So it all adds up. All this is starting to add up, and I hope it makes sense to everybody that despite all this, Edward Dowd said he's still bullish on gold and silver, and he's still, like he said, he's still bullish on the dollar maintaining for the time being. By the way, one of the things he says about this, he says his target for gold by 2030 is $10,000 per ounce. Now, folks, I just told you right now it's, just under $5,000. We'll see how it closes today. But as a result of this, you're seeing a ferocious appetite from big banks for gold. And of course, in the case of silver, industrial users for the metal, obviously it's in bombs and what have you. We're seeing those prices that will probably continue to go up as well. Now, one of the things that he talked about, though, which I thought was pretty interesting, he's bringing up the dollar, and he's talking about the dollar and how it's going to really stay the world reserve currency. I'll let you take a listen to clip 1 because, again, this is something everybody needs to hear. Let's take a listen.
No, the dollar is not going to zero. What backs the dollar is our nuclear arsenal and our command of the trade routes. I would be concerned on the dollar if we started abandoning overseas bases and we're no longer able to enforce the rule of law on the seas. That's the primary power of the reserve currency. Now, is it under threat? Is it being questioned? Absolutely. But reserve currencies don't die overnight. The international system is still tied into the dollar. If they wanted to go off the dollar tomorrow, they would cause a deflationary crisis in their own country. So this is a slow process, but it's not happening overnight. And mind you, the dollar is down big since Trump took office. And I suspect, just on the technicals and after the risk-off phase, there'll be a dollar shortage. And especially if trade is collapsing, there'll be a dollar shortage. So I expect the dollar it's counterintuitive, but the dollar has 4-year cycles. The only thing I'd be worried about is if we take out 89.10 and something really nasty is going on.
One of the things he doesn't mention here in this clip, and I think is important to bring up too, though, is the dollar is still going to be weakened greatly because of BRICS. That's what you're going to see right now. You're seeing people not trading or desiring the dollar, or again, like I said, if they're not trading with it, that's less dollars in circulation. That means the value of the dollar is going to drop. BRICS' job is to do that. They don't want to be just beholden to the dollar. Now, that doesn't mean they also don't trade in the dollar still, but they're looking for other alternative currencies to trade in. Why do you think we went into Venezuela? Well, because they were trading oil in the Chinese yuan. That's a blow to the dollar. So I think Trump wants to, and again, that's why Trump gave, $20 billion to Argentina recently to save their economy. All these things are a result because we want the dollar to be in circulation more. The less it's in circulation, obviously it drops as a world currency, as a world reserve currency, and of course, its strength as well. All right, let's move on. Let's talk hiring in America right now. I thought this article was pretty interesting. This is in WND, and it refers to IT workers in America. You know, we see a job posting, we see, a company has a job title, description, interests you, there's an opening, qualified people apply, there's an interview process, and the best candidate gets the job. That was once called meritocracy. We don't see that in America anymore, do we? Not at all. And what's happening now, though, especially across the information technology companies across America, one of the things that we're starting to see is this push towards H-1B visa holders in particular. And in this article, it has a couple different job postings. And what they're saying on a lot of these phrases inside these openings, they're saying things like H-1B, only H-1B. They're saying H-1B/H-1 preferred, OPT/CPT candidates welcome, H-4 EAD accepted, corp to corp only, independent visa, no H-2, H-2 only, GC EAD preferred, local and H-1B candidates only. Now, most Americans see that. They say, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, whatever this means. Preferred. Okay, what does it matter? Preferred. Well, in reality, it's really a filtering system, though. These recruiters are looking specifically for what I just told you, that one specific thing. For example, H-1B only. Now, they're not describing the technical job requirement, but they're rather talking about the worker dependency preference. When a job is posted on a listing, or it prefers a specific visa, like an H-1B or an OPT or a CPT or H-4 EAD, TN, whatever, the list can go on, it means that employer is now going to be recruiting from a specific visa pool, not from the general labor market inside America. So the visa status literally becomes a qualification. What do I mean by that? Well, if they desire an H-1B visa worker, they're legally tied to that company now. That's how they get them into the country. So again, changing jobs can be jeopardizing their immigration status. Their dependency gives staffing firms significant leverage over them. Their wages, their hours, their relocation, their contract duration. They can say, okay, you're based in Los Angeles. Tomorrow you're going to go to Plano, Texas now. Good luck trying to get another job someplace else. We'll squash your immigration status. This is how they undercut jobs. This is how they control people. This is how they control the market. This is what they like. They like obedient people working for them. But this greatly cuts down, obviously, American talent. That's what we need to understand. When President Trump sat down with Laura Ingraham recently in an interview, and she said, but we don't need H-1B visas to come in this country. We have the talent right here. He said, no, we don't. No, we need the talent from someplace else. First of all, for engineering in this country, absolutely we don't. We graduate some 116,000 different engineers every single year across the board over many different fields, and obviously engineering. Why do we need to continue to pull when we graduate so many every single year? What is the meaning for this? And by the way, one more thing to consider, of the top tech schools in the world, the top 6 are right here in the United States. So no, I don't think we need to pull talent from someplace else. We have talent right here. But what's happening is these IT companies, again, they try to look for people that they can control, people that is easier to have leverage over. That's why you're seeing this. Okay? So another blow to the Trump administration should they, again, beginning to pull in H-1B visas when you have young Americans that are skillful, that can take these jobs, that meet all the requirements, that are getting passed over for somebody else abroad. That's a big problem. And that's why you're seeing the Gen Zers coming out, and they're upset about this. Let's say they go to Stanford, they go to MIT, they go to Carnegie Mellon, they go anywhere else, Caltech, Cal Poly, it doesn't matter. They leave college with, 6-figure student loan debt, and of course they can't find a job, and even when they do find a job, it doesn't even make it lucrative to even have it. That's a big problem. That's what we're seeing time and time again. So I wanted to bring that up with everybody because that's important too, and that's another issue that's very, very important coming this midterm election. No on H-1B visas. By the way, the lobby pushes this too, by the way. That's another big problem we see with this. Congress allows this. They have to allow this. They actually passed a bill recently that allowed more H-1B visas to come into this country. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? It hinders American talent from growing. And it makes it counterproductive to go to school, to get educated for those jobs that are desired, that they have no option or way to get. Just a thought, Republicans, just a thought. I want to talk about what took place in Oman. And we had talks today between, of course, the United States and Iran. As you know, I love that we speak to other countries. I prefer diplomacy, revive that over, of course, wars. One could obviously agree with that, I'd hope. Now, Washington wanted to expand the talks not just from nuclear, but to talk about Iran's ballistic missile program and support for armed groups around the region. So, for example, Hezbollah, of course. This was touted by Marco Rubio on Wednesday. But what they're saying is that Iranian officials have repeatedly ruled out Iran's missiles. So again, they're not going to just simply destroy them or stop producing them. It's one of the largest arsenals up in the Middle East. That's not up for discussion for them. I told you this before. Now, Tehran also stated that they want its recognition of the right to enrich uranium. Now, I told you before, every single industrialized country in the world enriches uranium to some level. Not necessarily level enough to create a nuclear bomb. But for Washington, carrying out enrichment is always a possibility and a pathway to nuclear bombs. But again, we see this with many different countries that do not have nuclear weapons that have the right, of course, to enrich. This is just this is what countries want. They want to begin to industrialize their countries. This is one way they do it. Now, Tehran has long denied any intent to weaponize their nuclear fuel production. And they've time and time again have told us, and this is reiterated too in the IAEA program, that's, again, monitored, verified that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. Even Tulsi Gabbard, early in March of 2025, said Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. They've said this time and time again, yet for some reason, we still accuse them of building a nuclear weapon. And of course, we talk about the ramifications, the consequences that would come as a result of that. But it's not happening. Nobody can prove that they have nuclear weapons. And by the way, I thought we destroyed all their nuclear facilities when we bombed Fordo, Natanz, all these, right? I thought we destroyed all this. Now we're back to accusing them of building nuclear weapons. Now, they said that the talks went well. They said it was very serious. I don't know what really came as a result of all this. But here's one thing that I took away from another news article just this morning. It said that Trump spoke and he urged that American Iranians should consider leaving Iran soon. Now, again, that could indicate a whole slew of things, of course, but we know that, of course, we have an armada sitting in the North Arabian Sea, positioned to strike Iran. We know that Iran's ready to strike. We know what they will do if we decide to strike them. And Iran has vowed any harsh response to any strike and has cautioned neighboring Gulf Arab state countries that host the United States bases that they can be in firing line if they were involved in any type of attack on Iran. So that means the U.S. military bases, the oil fields, the refineries, Israel itself, because again, they know that Israel and the United States are colluding with each other on this. And again, the negotiators in Oman have tried to help navigate Iran's red line on discussing its missile program to reach a deal to avert military action inside the Middle East. But Tehran, again, has refused to do away with their missile program. And, of course, the range in which these ballistic missiles can reach. And again, they do business with Russia, too, on this as well. It's nothing unheard of. Again, I don't know to what extent these discussions brought us. Again, I'm glad they talked. Iran also demanded the lifting of U.S. sanctions, but were reimposed on Iran in 2018 by President Trump. And so, again, I'm glad that discussions took place. I just don't think anything came of it. We don't have anything on paper saying, okay, we'll put a truce in. We'll put a non-aggression pact. None of this came through. They talked about nuclear weapons. It's so easy for any U.S. official to come back and say, listen, we talked about it, but they're not going to give up their ballistic missile program. They still say they want to enrich. This poses a threat to the United States. Here we go. Anyone I've talked to, anyone I've listened to that's worth a damn believes that we will be in some sort of conflict with Iran in the near future. This is what they've said. This isn't Marco Dreischer saying this. This is what is going to happen. You're seeing the markets reflect this because of this rhetoric we're hearing. Now we're hearing that every Iranian that lives in the United States should consider leaving Iran. Again, I think it's going to be on the weekend. Should we do it? It could be this weekend. It could be next weekend. It could be 2 weekends from now. I don't know. It could be a month from now. It could be 5 months from now. I don't know. But everything that we're talking about, everything we're seeing is pushing us closer and closer to a regional war with Iran. And for what purpose, nobody really knows other than Israel really would like us to do this for them. So that's a cause of concern. So only time will tell if President Trump comes to his senses and realizes, hey, I can be responsible for destroying the entire global economy. I can be responsible for cutting off 25% of the world's oil production and export in the region. Yeah. All comes out of the Persian Gulf. 25% of the global oil trade comes out of the Persian Gulf. That would be shut down. So Trump has a lot on his plate right now. And again, Americans do not want this war. They don't want us. This is not a focus for us. Nothing good comes from us going to war with them. And again, it puts our troops and bases all throughout the Middle East in grave danger as well. So that's another thing to consider moving forward. I pray President Trump will come to his senses on this, but sometimes I just don't hold my breath on it. I want to move to an article in the California Post, and Mayor Karen Bass, secretly altered Palisades fire analysis to downplay LA's failures. That's interesting, because I thought they claimed that it was not her fault. But now what we see here is that she's trying to self-serve and tweak what's in this report because it could harm her political career. That's interesting to me. So really, by this, she's admitting to fault here. I would have to say, at least people that she hired, who are as completely useless as she is. So here we go. She's tampering with what's going on in this report. She doesn't want to look bad. She knows that she's coming up for a new election this year. And we know that the LAFD was called to this Palisades fire on New Year's Eve of 2025, New Year's Day. And they extinguished the fire. And that, as a result, it was of arson. And then it was claimed, though, that it burned underground. That was the claim, at least. And it was, said it was a holdover fire, so it burned underground, and eventually it started up again. Again, I find that a little bit odd because it was a small brush fire. It was obviously noticed. These are professional firefighters. They extinguished the fire. And then all of a sudden, days later, it's going to reignite and cause a massive catastrophe. One could only understand that. I think a lot of this has to do with Bass really cutting $18 million from the LAFD budget, creating obviously understaffing. There's communication issues, obviously, with what took place. We have the biggest issue was, of course, the fire hydrants with no access to water because the reservoirs were dried and nothing was done about that. How do you have one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Los Angeles with a damaged reservoir and no water in it, and no desire to fix that, after we came off months of no rain? At a time when we know that the Santa Ana winds pick up, obviously that could increase the chance for wildfires. One only knows, folks. And again, you're not alone in this query of yours to understand this. The person in charge of the LADWP couldn't even figure out that it was her job to fill these fire hydrants with water. Nobody, she had no idea. And by the way, Gavin Newsom, who limits controlled burns in California, brush clearance from happening for some reason, his forestry department has, not active in this. They knew that there wasn't rain too in California for months. They knew the Santa Ana winds pick up. This is the time of year where they should do controlled burns in certain areas. This is the time where they should clear brush so things can't get out of control like we saw. But what do we see? As a result, we saw 16,000 different structures and homes destroyed. And again, thanks to the red tape, because of Gavin Newsom, because of Karen Bass, they said it would be cut. Yet 10 months later, in November of 2025, what do we see? Only 11 to 17 new permits to begin rebuilding homes. So the 16,000, we have 11 to 17 new permits being issued. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's incredible, really. How anyone could take either of these too seriously to run for office, I don't know. But there's a lot of damage here that went on. And, of course, the cover-up on this is equally troubling as a result of this. This is $150 billion worth of damages. 12 people are killed. And nothing changes here. Now we're trying to alter reports. Again, the official report, which was released in October, cut a section from the initial version exposing the LAFD's choice not to fully staff or pre-deploy all available crews despite forecast of catastrophic winds because it didn't align with the city policy. So there's lots of blame to go all around. But again, we have our leadership from the top down. What was Karen Bass doing to solve this? What did she do to prevent this? What did Gavin Newsom do? They did absolutely nothing. And again, as a result of this, you have 16,000 homes and structures destroyed in some of the most wealthy landscapes in California. It's amazing to me. It's amazing these people could still want to be involved in politics after this. But no shame from them whatsoever. Oh, by the way, I want to go over this article in Slay News. I also wanted to go over this yesterday, but I ran out of time. Canada's coming up with a big crisis right now. Gun owners in Canada, they can now face prison time and prison sentences if they refuse to surrender newly prohibited firearms under the new federal buyback program that critics say amounts to a forced confiscation, which they disguised, this is the government, as a voluntary compliance program. Now, here's what took place. In May of 2020, under the great Justin Trudeau, the Canadian government has pursued what they call an assault-style firearms compensation program. Now, essentially what it does is it bans thousands of firearms, and what they do is they offer you payment for those owners that would turn in these firearms. Well, now what they're doing, they're taking it to the next level. Any type of gun owner that has a gun that is an assault style of firearm, which I don't even know what the hell that means. It's a made-up term. But any gun owner that fails to comply with this edict by October of 2026 could face up to 5 years in prison for illegal gun possession. So there you have it. It's not a voluntarily program. It's a mandatory program. Now, you've got gun right advocates. We have got several provincial governments argue that the program will be overwhelmingly impacting law-abiding citizens while doing little to curb actual real crime. But this is what's taking place in a lot of these tyrannical left-wing governments. This is what's happening. And by the way, let me just state this to you. In the California Constitution, they don't even have a right to bear arms. So this is how they can get around this. This is how they can do these things that are completely tyrannical. This is how they can control their population. This is what we're seeing. Now, of course, we're seeing the pushback from these gun right groups, but how far will they get? Only one really knows. But I want to compare that to the United States. We saw what, by the way, we see this taking place, the gun confiscations. We've heard talks about this in the United States. Thank God our founders gave us the right to own and, of course, keep and bear arms. The fact that they wanted to allow the people to obviously form militias. And of course, we have the wording that says shall not be infringed. You have the right to bear arms that shall not be infringed, and you have the right to create and form a militia should the government become tyrannical. That's why we have a Second Amendment. Now, of course, this fell on deaf ears during, obviously, the 2020 election and, of course, the 2019 election. The 2024 election. What do I mean by that? Well, the great Kamala Harris, when she ran for office, what is one of the things that she ran on, folks? She ran on gun confiscation. That was one of her big takeaways from this. This is what she wanted. Now, again, I'm old enough to remember, of course, when she was, AG of San Fran Schmucko, she tried to actually do a handgun ownership ban, but thankfully it got shot down by courts in California. But, as a lawyer, you would think they would understand the Constitution. They don't, because they don't care about the Constitution. It's not valid to them. But anyways, here's Kamala Harris in her own words talking about gun confiscation right here in the United States at a federal level. Take a listen.
I support buybacks, and it's something I'm so passionate about and so looking forward to being president to address. We've got to deal with this.
How mandatory is your gun buyback program?
It's mandatory. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away, so stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
What would you do about the millions of, specifically, assault weapons that are already in circulation? What do you do about those?
Well, there are approximately 5 million, to your point, Craig. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So she supports a mandatory buyback program. Okay? Dems want your guns. They want to keep you from having access to them. And never forget, this always happens in small increments. Versus an assault weapons ban, right? Joe Biden tried to push that, an assault weapons ban. You can't purchase a so-called assault weapon. What is an assault weapon? Nobody knows. But it sounds good, doesn't it? So they can label anything they want as an assault weapon. That's how these things work. Then you have things like no more than 10 rounds per magazine on your handgun. You have red flag gun laws, which again are all unconstitutional in my opinion, especially a red flag gun law, which meant that anybody who knows you could call the police and say, you know what, I feel so-and-so is a danger to myself or himself. This person owns firearms, then you get a knock on the door. The government can come in and then confiscate all your firearms, and maybe, if you're lucky, you can go to court and prove that you're sane enough to own guns, and then maybe get them back at some point, but good luck with that. All of these things, by the way, these take place all over, red states, blue states, preventing you from owning a firearm legally. And this is the red flag gun laws, I think, are some of the most unconstitutional ways that we have any type of legislation. They can come in and confiscate your guns without any form of illegality to it. How could somebody just come in and say, you know what, you're a threat. They view you as a threat, so therefore we can take your firearms. It doesn't make any bit of sense to me. And again, by the way, we live in a free society. If you don't want to own a gun, don't own a gun. If you want to own a gun, obviously you're going to do it through the legal channels, as most Americans do. It's the people that illegally obtain their firearms that is the big problem here in this country, by and large. We see this with gang violence, okay? We see this with illegal aliens owning firearms. So none of this is foreign to us. But again, if you're going to go through the legal channels to purchase a firearm, you're probably not going to go out and commit crimes right afterwards. Just my thought on this, folks. But again, never forget, this is what they wanted to do. This is what she wanted to do. And as time goes on, we see other nations do this. We saw what took place in Australia. They banned guns in 96. Yet what did we see last Hanukkah? We saw 2 men with rifles shooting at people, Jewish people, celebrating Hanukkah right out in the open in Bondi Beach. It's unbelievable. So, no, this doesn't work because criminals don't follow the law. But that's not good enough for them. They don't care. They just want an unarmed populace. For God knows what. I can only imagine. You can too. But this is where we see things going right now. I don't think it'll ever work in America. Thank God for that. I wouldn't expect it to, but you never know what the Democrats, what these activists, what they try to do here in this country. All right, folks, we got about 9 minutes or so remaining. Last article of the program. Let's take a look at this. This is out of USA Today. I saw this on social media, actually, and I couldn't wrap my head around this morning. But it says here that students across America organize walkouts to protest ICE. Now, of course, students, you would think, oh, these must be college students. Well, no. These are thousands of middle school and high school students alike across the country taking to the streets during school hours to protest the actions of immigration and customs enforcement. And, of course, this is after the shootings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good inside Minneapolis that took place last month. And as a result, we've seen a series of nationwide students walking out of class beginning on January 30th as a part of the so-called national shutdown. And this was all organized, again, asking Americans to skip school, stay home from work, and boycott shopping in protest of ICE's operations across the country. Let's stop and think about this. Who are they using right now as a crutch here for this movement? They're using young children. Now, folks, I don't think I need to tell you, if you go look at history, go look at China, communist China, go look and see who the Red Guard were. They were kids. It was Mao using children, school-age children, to rise up against the capitalists or, their parents. That's what took place. You go look at that, go look at the Red Guard. We're seeing the exact thing play out right here. You're seeing kids hold signs, again, made by well-funded people. I'm looking at one sign right now. It says, out of our communities, Party for Socialism and Liberation. These are kids holding these signs. Now, of course, I believe, and I'm sure you do too, that children should be in school to learn. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think we're 24th worldwide now, before we were number 1 in the world as far as our public schools. Now we're 24th. One can only imagine why, right? It's because they're not learning anything. They're learning nonsense. They're learning propaganda. They're learning how to become activists versus critical thinking students. They're not doing that anymore. They don't know how to compute. They don't know how to function. They just know how to say yes and no. More so, yes, of course, when it comes to, do you want to leave school early? Now, these walkouts and, of course, these marches have extended well beyond the shutdown day, with young people leaving classes and now taking to the streets in subsequent demonstrations. And they are there, in these student-led protests. And it's happening more and more. So in other words, it didn't just happen on that January 30th. Now we're seeing it take place more and more. Here are some examples. Indianapolis, Indiana. Students across Indianapolis Metro have walked out or plan to this week. And hundreds of students from North Central High School poured onto the streets on Monday, February 2nd, prompting police to close northern Indianapolis streets, while a few hundred marched out of Noblesville High School on the same day. Remember, this is a red state, folks. You're seeing this all over. This is who runs the schools. This is who runs the school boards. These are the unions, right? These are the school boards. Who runs them? The communists run them. This is what you're seeing. And again, they're holding up these moronic signs, all things of which you would imagine to be in any of these protests. But look at this. We have a student organizer, Emma Louise Kinley, I think that's how you say the name. We're feeling powerful is what she says. We're feeling like our voices, they have a real impact. I don't think so. Again, this is why I told you too, this back down by Tom Homan to remove ICE agents from Minneapolis before the objective is reached is really stupid. And this is why you're seeing this. This is why you're seeing this. They think this is a win. Now, do you think if you stopped any middle schooler or even a high schooler, they would understand all the ramifications of what took place with ICE? Probably not. Now, they may have heard of ICE shooting somebody, but what about ICE's presence in the country? Is it important? Is it not important? That's what you have to ask yourself. And again, this is why they're using the young children, because again, they're malleable as far as what they know. And you're seeing more walkouts planned again all across the country right now. It doesn't just stop in Indianapolis. Let's go to Tallahassee, Florida. Students in Tallahassee and beyond brave the abnormal cold, is what they say. Yeah, try living in Siberia. Let me know if you can brave that cold. Nearly 100 students at Lincoln High School in eastern Tallahassee marched off campus in protest of ICE. Yep, the hate in the halls is loud, but we want it to be louder. We hope to advocate for peace and equality, is what the student organizer has stated. Part of USA Today Network documented this. We want to show Tallahassee that we do not stand with ICE. Okay. In Port Orange, an estimated 100 Atlantic high school students skipped school in the afternoon on January 30th to protest, defying threats of disciplinary actions from school students. Oh, yeah, they're future criminals, of course. Look at this. ICE is breaking the law. I guarantee if you went up and asked any of these kids how ICE is breaking the law, they would have an example. Now, that doesn't mean ICE isn't breaking the law, of course. But do you think these kids understand this? Most adults don't understand this, which makes it all the more ridiculous. So look at the defiance, even the basis of disciplinary actions. I mean, if you asked me back when I was in school, do you think it's okay if I just walk out of school? Of course I would say no. You just want to walk out of school. You would have a protest based on a federal mandate to enforce federal immigration law. Yeah, these kids don't know what they're talking about by and large. Let's go over to Fort Collins in Denver, Colorado. Nearly half of the 766 students at Lesher Middle School participated in a student-led walkout. Remember, it says student-led, which I doubt very much so. Several Denver area school districts closed or changed their schedules on January 30th to accommodate the large student walkouts as thousands marched to the state capitol. It's not a state capital issue. It's not a state issue at all. It's a federal issue. These ignoramuses. And look at the other side of this building here in Colorado. It looks like at Fort Collins it says Black History Month in big letters on the side of the school. Reno, Nevada, no different. Hundreds of middle school and high school students across the Washoe County walked out on January 30th. Young people came from across Reno area, including Reno, McQueen, Sparks, Worcester, and DeMonte high schools. We are sick of seeing on the news how ICE is shooting and killing and how the budget is going crazy and how everything is out of control. Well, spoken like a true intellect, right? That's what 18-year-old student James Frazier told the Reno Gazette-Journal. Yeah. And again, here we have kids holding the Mexican flag up inside Nevada. Not the American flag, the Mexican flag. Well, they've been taught very well, haven't they? Milwaukee, no different. I just saw a picture of this. Here we go. It says here, I care about this a lot, excuse me. I think that students are here at Whitefish Bay have a lot of privilege and we need to speak out. So they bought into the rhetoric already. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Phoenix, Arizona, no human is illegal on stolen land, so they know exactly what the ignoramus Billie Eilish said, which I talked about on Monday's show. You can go back and listen to that, how moronic that whole statement really is. But let me ask you this. No human is illegal on stolen land. So is the land stolen or do we have a country? Which one is it? Well, don't try telling it to these kids. The heads will explode. And we're seeing it in Knoxville, Tennessee. You're seeing it in Asheville, North Carolina. You're seeing it all across the country. Palm Springs, California. All these different areas are allowing kids to leave class, prevent them from learning, as a way to get them out of the classroom. And to be honest with you, they're probably not learning too much anyway, I would have to say. So it probably doesn't matter too much anyways. So it's unbelievable, folks. But again, this just is a grave warning. They're using children now to push political agendas, just like the Chinese communists did with the Red Guard. So you can look that up too if you'd like. But exactly what I thought of when I saw this, I said they're using the kids, just like the communists did in China. It's very, very sad to see this. Another show down, another week in the books, folks. Thanks again for being here and tuning into today's show. Hope you learned something. Hope you'll share with others. And again, thank you for those that are doing that. I couldn't do it without you. Folks, make sure you're keeping up with, obviously, your prep in your house. Keep your mind sharp, your body strong. Have a great rest of your weekend and enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here on Monday for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, God bless.